Hello, everybody. Kelsey Komorowski here, founder of Como. I'm here today with Connor. He is one of our incredible rockstar students who has showed up today extremely prepared to share his story with you guys. I know it's going to resonate with a lot of you. I'm absolutely delighted that he's taken the time out of his very busy schedule to be here and to talk with me and to let you know about his experiences. So, Connor, I'm going to just pass it over to you if you can tell us what grade you're in, and if you can kind of describe yourself as a student the last couple of years, and we'll start there.
Okay, so I'm Connor and I'm in the eighth grade. And basically, as a student, I think I would describe myself as very impulsive. I didn't like to take much time to think about problems or answer them thoroughly. Or if it was too far back, I wouldn't find the exact page in the book I had to go to. And so I was very rushed, I felt like, or I wanted to rush because I always wanted to be outside to play. So that made myself feel rushed, which then showed up not great on my work as I didn't receive the grades I wanted to throughout seventh grade online, which was a tough challenge. But I think that as a student, I was more, I didn't care about school really. My friends did. Then it's I was just one of those kids who was there to be there, see their friends, go home and get outside. I really didn't want to be there for 7 hours of the day. It was a struggle. It was just not fun at all. The only thing I liked was lunch and recess, like most younger kids. But yeah.
Okay, Connor, that's I love that description. That's very honest. It seems like that's painting a very candid picture. Let me just ask a couple of follow-ups.
Okay.
So looking at kind of grade six, grade seven, coming into this year, grade eight, obviously, great. You mentioned grade seven was all online. That was COVID. But in general, like thinking being in school for 7 hours a day, what did you find tough about it? Like you mentioned, I want to go outside. I'm rushing my work, but like, was it that you didn't like your subjects, you didn't like your teachers, that you're just kind of you weren't really interested in school in general? Like what was it specifically that you just didn't really want to be there?
I think that, I mean, it was just the fact that I had to go. It felt like a job almost, if that makes sense, more than me going to learn. It was, I mean, the length of the day felt when I got home at 3 o'clock when I was in elementary school. Now I get home a little earlier because I go earlier, but getting home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I think to myself, okay, 3 to 4, we'll give the homework, if that, when I was younger. And so I would say 4 to 6, I have time to play. And 2 hours to me wasn't much because in the summer, all I did was go outside and play. So really, I think just the almost wanting to be doing other things and having my mind on other things most of the time, wanting to be other places, played a very, very big factor in me not wanting to be at school. Um, yeah.
That's fair. I'm hearing possibly like some resentment of just like I've got to go do this. I don't really want to do it. I'd rather be doing other stuff, but like
Mhm.
I have to be doing this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was your relationship with school. And then like Connor, what were, if I can ask, like what were your grades like? Like kind of given that this was how you were looking at school and feeling towards it, were you still doing really well or were you not doing too well?
So I, throughout elementary school, never had trouble with school. My parents always told me it's gonna get harder, it's gonna get harder. I thought school was a breeze. And that's also contributing, I probably should have said that, why I didn't like it, because it was, I don't want to say it was easy, but it wasn't a challenge. I was taking accelerated courses where they had accelerated reading and accelerated math. So I would take those courses. And I mean, I think I didn't have really a low B throughout elementary school. It was just one of those things that was a lot easier for me until middle school because I didn't have to really manage stuff on my own. It was more of a 5 subject day rather than a 6 or 7 in middle school. And I just found it much easier, which is now looking back on it, surprising how well I did because of how I looked at it. And even now I look at it different and don't do as well. So it's just
Okay, so I'm hearing elementary kind of a breeze, not too hard.
yeah.
How about let's talk eighth grade specifically, and obviously we'll talk more a bit about the transition to high school coming up. But for
Okay.
eighth grade, like starting, think back to the fall and throughout, the first semester, say, were you getting grades that you were happy with? Like, were you getting A's, easy A's, we always say, or were you getting like, were you having to work, or were you feeling like I didn't want to do the work, so I wasn't getting the grades, I wasn't getting very good grades? Like, what was the situation there?
Um, for situation for the first semester, eighth grade, there were some classes like math, which I started taking Spanish one, Spanish one, and then math one. So two high school courses, which I was just not really ready for. Because even sixth grade was a little easier. So the two high school courses really kind of kicked my tushy in the first semester. Math was not what I had wanted it to be. Now I'm not the greatest math person. My brother is incredible at math, but I think it was a low 70. At one point I was in the 60s in math, which I hadn't seen in a while. I mean, seventh grade, I think at one point I had a 79 was the lowest it got, and I was like mad. And so this year I didn't care because I almost got used to having a lower grade in seventh grade because of the COVID year, and I just didn't care as much. And so when I got used to having a lower grade, it didn't bother me as much. Like in elementary school, if I got a 70 on something, I was mad, which kind of shows I did care about my grades. But there were some classes that were easier. I would say social studies, science was pretty difficult in the first quarter as well. Just everything, it's almost like a first kind of year of high school. They're trying to get you ready. So they're putting more on your plate. They're giving you less time. It's more independent. So it was not the way I really wanted to start the year, but it wasn't treacherous. Like it wasn't awful. I still had a few A's. I had a few high B's and then a low C in math.
Gotcha. I like that word, by the way, treacherous. I feel like that's an underused word. It wasn't treacherous, but it wasn't ideal. So you said it was Spanish and math that were the accelerated classes. Those were like the grade 9 classes that you were taking kind of as prep for this year. And those were the ones. So, okay. So Connor, my first thought, because this is so interesting. I wish sometimes that students in grade 7, grade 8 could have a taste of high school just to see that it does get harder. I know people say that, but it's like, no, it's actually going to get more difficult. Yeah. Were you surprised at how that it was that much harder? Like, or did it take you by surprise, or were you kind of expecting it to be more challenging?
I had an idea. I was like, okay, high school, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, but the amount of work and the amount of time you have to start understanding it is just so much less. Like a unit for elementary or earlier middle school might be 2 weeks. They might give you a week and a half or only 1 week in the high school class. And you almost have to prepare more on your own. You're not going to get all the practice you need. You're going to have to go home and get practice you need. So there's just less time to do it, but there's more work. And it just gets more difficult. I mean, math 1 here in where I live is all algebra. So it was all letters and stuff. It's a whole different ballgame when you get into different types of things like that.
Well said. Yeah. So it's faster, and the expectations of what you need to do on your own are more intense. Okay. So, did that bother you? You mentioned when you were a bit younger, if you were getting lower grades, that it would bother you. Were you feeling like, oh, this is hard, but I don't really care, it's fine? Or were you feeling like, oh man, this is hard and it's a problem? Like, what was your kind of reaction to that?
For Spanish, I definitely was like, oh, this is more difficult, but I'm handling it. I had about an 86 or 7 at the time. So I was handling that, and I knew it was harder, but I was doing better with that. But math was a big red flag because I had low 70, high 60 throughout most of the first quarter. I think I ended up with like a 73 as my first quarter final. So that was definitely a big red flag, and that was about the time my mom was trying to look for tutoring or different types of things like that.
Well, and you read my mind for my next question for you was like, so as these kind of struggles and challenges start happening, did you, like that first term before we met, but did you end up doing any, like, did you get tutoring? Did you get extra help from teachers? Like, what kind of things did you try, or from your mom and dad? What kind of stuff did you try to, figure it out?
So my teacher every Wednesday has tutoring after class for anything we need help on. So I would go to that, but my math teacher, for me personally learning, I have to have a lot of explaining and a lot of practice. And with the high school course, it's not as much of that, and there's not as much explaining. Now there's explaining, but I just wasn't fully having time to wrap my head around everything that was happening before we move on. So the tutoring wasn't helping much because she would go through it assuming I knew it. And it was just it didn't work really well for me because I was still trying to slowly understand it before I could practice. And so, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I want to pause there and unpack it a little bit, because I think that's a really important distinction. And a lot of students that we work with, at least they've had tutors. a lot of
Mhm.
tutors. And so when they're looking at us, they're like, I tried tutors, it didn't really help, it didn't really work, whatever. So Connor, can tell us a bit more about, and then we'll also talk about this a bit more about our work together, but specifically when it came to thinking about or getting tutored for math specifically in this case, what, like you mentioned, just can you kind of recap about what was the challenge that you felt was not being addressed by seeking tutoring or seeking extra classroom support, things like that?
Um, I think that for me, it was more of the process for the math that was difficult. There were a lot of steps to it, and so I was having trouble just comprehending it in the first place before it was practice. So I wasn't really understanding at all how to do it.
Mm.
And then when we had to do it in class individually or whatever, I just couldn't do it. And so I would guess. And then my grade would obviously not would reflect that I guess, but I just couldn't comprehend it. And I've always not been the greatest math mind, but I didn't have as much time as I personally would have needed to comprehend it. But in elementary school, with I think this math course, if it was more drawn out and I had more time, that's what I think benefited me in elementary school. So I slowly had to learn how to wrap my head around it faster and more practice. But that was the miscommunication. She thought I need to practice. I was even a step behind practice. I was just trying to wrap my head around the whole thing.
That's, man, Connor, that is so insightful. I feel like you literally, like what you just shared is pretty much, you could apply that. That's literally when we talk about learning how to learn. Like you've just said, it's like it's a process. And if you don't know the steps, if you don't know how to do something, in this case, maybe it's math, it's a formula, it's whatever. But that literally what Connor just said, I want to like make this so clear because it's so important. It literally applies to everything. If you don't know how to learn, if you don't know the steps for doing it, then forget about practicing it. You don't even have the knowledge of how to start to get good at it when you don't have that foundation. So Connor, did you know this like at the time, like when you were struggling with math in your head, were you just like, I don't understand these steps or the process and that's why I'm struggling? Or did you kind of figure that out later? Or were you aware at the time of like, this is why I'm struggling? Like, did you know why you were struggling?
I figured it out later that I wasn't comprehending it, but in the moment I was assuming that I comprehended it because I had done that for years before. So I tried to almost force myself to do the problem or look at the steps because we had all the steps written in our notebook. And so I would skip the comprehension part and almost how to understand it or what to do and just go immediately to steps to apply to the problem. And I was like, I mean, you obviously can't skip a step. So I was trying to force myself one step ahead, which I just couldn't do. And then eventually, as I went on, I was realizing I don't even know what to do, or I don't even know how to comprehend this, which was a step behind it.
That sounds frustrating.
Yeah,
So,
it was a
okay.
long first, second quarter type of thing. I was just trying to figure it out almost.
Sounds like it. So, okay. So this challenge is presenting class, this class, the math class and the Spanish class are harder. You mentioned, you're looking at getting tutored, you're looking at extra classroom help. It wasn't really moving the needle much. So Connor, what was the next step then? Like first of all, how did you find out about us? And actually, you know what? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about that. How did you hear about us?
So it was over Christmas break that I was like relieved. I was like, I'm out of school. Don't know. I mean, I was just not even going to think about school whatsoever, which any kid would do over Christmas break.
Fair.
And I think that was around the time where my mom was like talking with my dad and saying, we got to find something. I mean, we've tried tutoring with this teacher, which is going to be the most helpful because it's the person that's teaching him in the classroom every single day. And that wasn't working. And we didn't want to go to another tutor because I'd never really had one. So we wanted to try to keep it almost kind of classroom resource wise because that was going to be the most help. And what I even told them was, yes, that'll probably be the most help for me, even though I wasn't getting anything out of it. So my mom was, I think, looking at tutoring, even just like experiential learning type of platform type of things. And she eventually ran across you guys. And the first call we had, I thought it was a math tutoring call. And it was snowing, and I was so mad because I had to sit inside while everybody was outside because it doesn't snow much here. And I was like, why am I doing math? I'm like, just after Christmas break, I don't want to do this right now. But that's basically how it all started.
You must have hated us. I didn't know that. Coming in being like, these people are taking away my snow time.
Well, I didn't really understand it. When they even went through it, I was like, what do they mean 5 hours of work a week or this worksheets? I'm like, how am I going to do this like on top of what I'm doing? It just made absolutely no sense until I had the second call, like the follow up to see if I actually wanted to do it and more details were laid out. So I had no clue what was happening.
Okay, that's really good to know. And that's actually perfect. So, Connor, how would you explain what we do, what this is all about? We talk a lot about learning how to learn. We talk about, we have this 8-week program. I love everything you just said is perfect. How would you, now that you've actually done it, if you were to go back to Connor, right after Christmas break, or if you're looking at a student who's like, I'm not doing an 8-week program, that sounds terrible. How would you describe it? Just top of head, what would you say it's all about?
It's basically about giving you the resources to not just study, but give yourself a better chance in a way, because there's so many different um, modules or different. I think it's it's 8 lessons, and they're all on different ways to study. They're on different ways to help yourself become a better student, and also not get behind and stay up to date with everything, and basically just like I said, give yourself a better chance, because I didn't have a planner. I had absolutely nothing before Google Calendar. I just kind of would remember things, and it would just kind of become a mess when I would think that I didn't have anything after school, and my mom would be like, "Come on, get in the car. We're going to the dentist." And I'd be like, "What? You didn't tell me this. I was going to do this after school." And it was just so hectic. So definitely for me, it was time management. That was a big help, was the calendar, because now I see everything my mom has and I have, and even when my dad has things. So just it basically gives you an overall, it's much easier if you can keep up with it and almost make it a habit like I have. It just makes your life a whole lot easier from an academic standpoint, just like studying. I mean, making study guides and all that type of thing, and essays and all that stuff. It makes it a whole lot easier and gives yourself a real chance at doing really well.
That is such an awesome overview to hear, Connor. And I love that it's like the 8 calendar study guide essays. You're hitting all of like the heavy hitters there, which is awesome. So, okay, let's go back to, because now obviously you've gone through, you've come out on the other side with these tools. Initially though, I want to kind of look at your initial reaction of like, I'm sorry, you want me to do this program and spend 5 hours a week learning stuff? Are you no, like, are you crazy? Which is totally fair. We get that a lot. Why did you come around? And like, sorry, full disclosure. First of all, Connor and I haven't actually talked about this before, so we're just we're finding all of this out. But second of all, the way that we run our program is the student makes the decision. It's not like an open enrollment. It's really, the student has to be a fit. The student has to want to come in. They have to be open to learning. So we talk with a lot of students who are like, I'm not doing this, and that's it. And that's obviously fine. A lot of students, I think kind of what Connor is saying is like, that sounds terrible, I'm not doing it. And then something happens and they end up coming around and doing it. And obviously it's wonderful. Well, I would use the word wonderful, Connor. I'm sure you would use a different word, helpful. But what happened for you, Connor, to go from like, no, to, all right, I'm open, I'll give it a try?
I think that the big thing for me was when, I forget who told me this, but it might have been on the welcome video, but give it 2 weeks and if you put the time in, you'll already see the results. Because at that point I knew it was an 8-week thing, and I was like, I'm not gonna wait 8 weeks to get results. I want it like now. So the 2 weeks were, I mean, I saw the results after 2 weeks. I could tell you can see yourself starting to come around. So I think that helped a lot. And I was like, okay, this is like the last thing. My mom's like, this is my last resort. I don't know what to do after this. So I was like, I'll give it a chance. I did not want to, but that 2 weeks, if it said you'll see results after 8 weeks, I don't know if I would have done it, but that saying I'll get results after 2 weeks, which I did, help me in mindset wise to still do it and try it.
I love that. I love so much that you shared that 2-week piece. So, all right, 2 things then. For you, what happened in the 2 weeks specifically? You just mentioned mindset. Tell us a bit more about that. Like, what kind of mindset change or shift, or what do you mean by that exactly?
I think that once the 2 weeks kind of came around, or even a little before, I was noticing that I was not forgetting really any assignments or last minute. It was all going back to the time management. I really kept up the calendar because the first 2 weeks is harder to get all the information for the modules because you've only done two of them. So I think the calendar, which was the first one, really I saw start to come around because I was not wanting to do it. You could say I was wanting to do it because I could see everything I had to, and it was right in front of me, and I could see the whole week, the whole month, the whole year, everything that I had coming up, and it was a stress reliever in a way because my mom wasn't having to make sure we knew what was going on because she would just send me an invite and I'd click yes or whatever, and I'd have that on my calendar and hers as well. So it was everything, just kind of a little bit of a weight lifted off my shoulders, remembering a busy schedule in my head. Just I didn't have to remember anything. I could go around during the day and not think, oh, wait, we'll have after school again. It's just type in Google Calendar in the search bar, and there it is.
That's, I love that. That's so wonderful. Just so many reasons. And I also am cognizant of our time, and I'm not going to like ask you every single question that comes to mind because otherwise we'd be here for an hour, which I promised Connor I would not keep him for that long. So Connor, a couple things then. You mentioned about, your mom, instead of asking you stuff, would you say, because a lot of students we talk to are like literally number one thing, they're like, I wish my mom and dad would get off my back. Like they will not stop nagging me or checking in on me, blah, blah, blah. They don't trust me, all of these things. And I kind of normally am like, they're asking you about these things because they're not getting done. Did you find, so with the calendar, like, can you speak a bit about, the input of getting it set up, creating it, managing it, and then, but like also the rewards of not just like, yeah, feeling confident, seeing all of your stuff, but even in terms of like your relationship with your parents, like what kind of difference did that make?
Oh, I mean, I hated my mom talking to me about school. I mean, we have not talked legitimately about school, instead outside of our little meetings we have twice a week since we started. I mean, it used to be always about school. Oh, what'd you do today? Or what's this grade you just got in? And now we don't talk about that at all. And I think my mom and I kind of clash because we use the same, I so called argument methods, but we're very similar. So we clash heads a little bit. I mean, my mom even said, I've noticed the difference, and we haven't argued because it's always over school. It's always, oh, well, why didn't you turn this assignment in? And I'll try to make up an excuse or something, but we have not really taught. I mean, they don't nag me at all because they now trust me to get it done, and they'll know I will because I know I have it.
That's awesome. And Connor, the little conversation that you mentioned, just because I don't think other people will know, if you've been with us a while, you will know. So you guys, we do something called the Terms of Engagement conversation. We call it a TOE, which a couple of parents have started calling TOE, which I don't know how I feel about that. Connor, we'll just call it TOE for now. But it's essentially, no, sorry, Connor, how would you describe what the TOE, it's a foundational tool we use to set up like better communication and relationships around school for parents and students. How would you describe what this conversation is?
So for my mom and I would say that we do it Sunday nights are big when we set all of our calendars up for the week. So it's like, okay, what do you have Monday after school? This and that. And then also we go over grades, and that's the only time we're supposed to talk about school. So then they're not nagging us. So once we go over all that and make sure everything's turned in and grades are checked and everything's good, it's basically just to check on how each other is doing basically through school and then scheduling as well.
Excellent. Yeah, Connor just described it beautifully. It's essentially school should not be talked about outside of the specific times that we co-construct and we set. And one of the things that we do in the first week or two we work together, we mediate a conversation. So between Connor and his mom in this case about, hey, how often are we going to talk about school, for how long, and what are the things we're going to talk about? And then both parties, Connor, and although Connor, I'm sure you weren't too tempted to be talking to your mom a ton about school outside of the time, so it was probably a bit harder for your mom, but both parties, the parent and the student, honor that, and you don't talk about school outside of it. And anyway, that's, Connor said it beautifully, so that's awesome. Okay, so the TOE was a big one too. Okay, so Connor, I'm hearing then really going from like not interested, no way, I'll give it 2 weeks for results. You're seeing these results, you're feeling, you mentioned like a weight off your shoulders, feeling a mindset shift, happy that your mom is not at you every day about it. Was there anything else just in general throughout that time, aside from the calendar obviously is huge, you mentioned the study guide and the essay. What would you say, was there any like one or two things that come to mind that for you made a difference, that for you made classes easier or made you feel more confident, or anything at all really that that for you moved the needle?
I'd say probably social studies. We take a lot of notes and it's a lot of
Mm.
outside of class type of stuff. So I mean, there might be days where I have 3 or 4 things for social studies at home. So knowing that I know every single thing I have to do has helped a lot because it hasn't been the toughest class. But if you forget some notes one day or forget to do it and it's a late grade and it just brings your grade down. But having the calendar for stuff like that, and then also ELA, we wrote our, it was weird, perfect timing. I wrote my first actual essay when I was doing the training. So that did help a lot as well.
That's actually very cool. Like your first essay ever? You did it while you were
Yeah.
with us?
Yep.
Very cool. So did you actually follow, and you can, I trust you'll be honest, but I'm just curious, like, did you actually follow the steps as laid out, or were you like, I'm not going to do these steps? No, you did the
Yeah,
steps.
I mean, my teacher helped us give us steps as well, but it was pretty much the same stuff that you guys were doing. So I did that with the videos.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, awesome. And so Connor, let me ask you this. If we're kind of zooming out, given that, you know, what you shared about kind of the first rough 2 quarters, coming into where you are now, what would you say? And you guys too, I'm going to frame this in terms of learning how to learn. Like, yes, we have our program, it is 8 weeks, but what Connor is really describing, we didn't do any of this for Connor. And to be very clear, Connor showed up, Connor came to calls, Connor put effort and energy into learning new things. Like none of this would have happened without Connor deciding like, well, I want to better my situation. I'm going to give it a few hours a week to make that happen. And he did. So Connor, what to you right now, what would you say are like, you know, your one or two favorite things about how you're feeling now versus how you were feeling maybe at the end of last term?
Definitely stress free. Again, definitely emphasizing that because it's easier to, like I said, go about your day and not worry about things that you have to do. And also, I would say, what's another thing? So many different things. Have more free time because I've not forgotten to do things last minute. So if you have a lot going on at school, then that means you might have something that you have to do last minute every night. So if you get it done earlier, I find that I have a lot more free time to myself to where I can do what I want after school, especially on Fridays and not realize, oh, I have this due Tuesday, got to do it now.
That's huge. I think the free time is maybe one of the best things that can come out of learning how to learn and manage your time and manage yourself, etc. Connor, have you happened to enjoy any homework free weekends at all yet?
A lot more.
A lot more. Okay.
At least.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay. I have two final questions for you, Connor. What advice, if any, would you have for parents, considering just what you went through with your parents, your mom especially? I love that you're describing yourself as like a mini you for your mom. It's awesome. She's gonna love this, by the way, when she eventually watches this. But yeah, any advice for parents who might be watching this, being like, oh my God, Connor's just described all of these struggles my kids are having. Like, what is the kind of kid perspective here? And I'm sorry, you're going into high school, you're a student, but you know what I mean. What advice would you have for parents based on your experience?
I'd say if they do start the Como, you need to let them go because my mom did, and it almost gives them another booster that once they start to do this and see that you're not nagging them anymore, it almost, I would say, motivates in a way. It's like, oh, they're not nagging me anymore. This something must be working. So if you just kind of lay off of them, which my mom did, which I felt helped me as well, give me more confidence. Like, oh, she's trusting me more. She's not nagging me about school every minute of the day. So that definitely, if you just lay off, then it'll give them some confidence.
That, Connor, I'm going to be clipping that and just broadcasting it to like every parent I talk to. That's awesome. And then same question for students. You know, if there's another teenager watching this, feeling like school sucks, I don't want to do it, it's brutal, it's this, it's that, I also don't want to necessarily do a program for school. What advice would you give to them?
I say you just gotta stay in it. Don't do 4 weeks and then give up. You have to do the full 8 weeks because you will get every bit out of it. So just keep doing it. It's very difficult, but in the end, you will see a lot more results than you will if you stop in 4 weeks in.
I love it. That is preaching perseverance and sticking with it. Connor, your attitude and honestly the way that you've showed up for yourself, I know I already said it, but it's honestly just been so awesome to watch. And even hearing you talk about it right now, I've learned a lot about your journey I didn't actually know, and it's really cool. So that's all for today, Connor. I'm going to let you go, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Anybody watching, Connor's story, his whole experience and learning how to learn started with his mom booking a call with our team. And even if your kid is not interested and they don't want to do it, I think Connor's a great example of, you know what, let's see what's possible. You never know, your kid might surprise you. So I'll leave it there. The link to book a call will pop up here. And otherwise, that's it for us today. Connor, thanks again for joining us and being so candid with your story. And everybody else, we will see you on our next interview. Bye, guys.